Great. So we are here today with Paul Kellenberger, and Paul is the CEO and on the founding team of zSpace.
Correct.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Paul. And so really what I would love to do is if you can just tell us a little bit about zSpace, first of all.
Sure. So zSpace is a very unique, revolutionary company. We have taken virtual reality and augmented reality to, I'm going to say, a whole different level, unlike any other products that are out in the marketplace today. We build zSpace as real-world virtual reality, and the real-world component of it allows you to interact as you would in the real world with people. So, unlike the goggles, Oculus-type folks in the world today, you and I could be interacting just like we're having a conversation right now, and we could be interacting with virtual reality type objects and visualizing, and in the context of learning, really taking advantage of the whole virtual reality, augmented reality experience. So that's really what zSpace is all about. And quite frankly, we really see ourselves as at the forefront of virtual reality, augmented reality.
Sure, and we can certainly say that being from Corinth, that's certainly been our experience with your devices as well.
So one other piece to that, the zSpace is really a platform. So if you think about hardware, software, and the user interface, we're really focused as a platform. And we want as many applications, if you will, on the platform as possible. Obviously, Corinth being one of the key ones in the education world. And we're looking to get more and more developers in all different markets with applications on zSpace taking advantage of the platform.
Sure. Okay, great. And so, Paul, we're curious, so what motivated you and the other people on your founding team to start zSpace in the beginning?
Sure. Maybe a quick step back in the history. I'm 16 years experience with two big public companies. Neither one of them exists anymore. One of them was eventually acquired by Hewlett-Packard, and the other one was eventually acquired by Google. 17 years here in Silicon Valley. This is my fifth startup, and lots of different experiences over the course of that number of years. zSpace, my previous company, was actually in education. It was an enterprise play in education, a software company. And zSpace, from the perspective of having an impact in multiple markets, multiple industries, but in terms of impacting student learning, student engagement from the very beginning of the company, was one of the critical items that we looked at. We didn't start initially in education or in the learning market, but we knew from day one it was an obvious market that could really take advantage of zSpace.
Mm-hmm. And when you get that feedback, you use the word engagement, what is it that students are telling you? Or are they,
Sure.
Yeah, can you...
So I think, in fact, there was a really interesting study from the Gallup group that came out last year, and they summarized the biggest problem in U.S. education as engagement. Students being engaged in learning. By the way, teachers as well. Not all the teachers, but some of the teachers.
Yeah.
So that was the number one item in the learning side of it. And as it relates to STEM, and we're not 100% STEM focused, but STEM is a big piece of it, getting kids interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. And that was, I'll say, the initial genesis for where we went and focused, but it's gone much broader than that. Again, getting students wanting to learn in those areas is I'll kind of put it in that early critical area. And so initially, I'm going to say many of the applications that we've been working with have been, I'm going to say, very focused on students learning content in those areas. As we've developed over the course of the last 2.5 years, a number of school districts have talked to us about improving critical thinking and experimentation. So as opposed to students just learning things by rote, it's about them experimenting on their own to learn new concepts. And abstract concepts tend to be the most difficult ones for students to actually understand. So zSpace helps make learning those abstract concepts, I'm going to say, both fun, engaging, and easier. There's some efficacy testing that we're currently underway with out of the Friday Institute, out of North Carolina State University. And the initial implications and the initial findings, which are not yet published but will, are very positive that I'm going to say demonstrate the impact of zSpace, specifically on improving student learning.
Yeah, and that's used a really powerful phrase as well, Paul, which was just kind of creating a way to motivate students to learn, so that you're really driving their curiosity as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Those are really, really big things. And again, we have lots of videos on our website. We've been in, we're in about 100 school districts in the U.S., approaching 1,000 schools.
Yeah.
And everywhere we go, there's an excitement. There's an initial excitement in experiencing zSpace because it's so unique and so, I'll say, revolutionary. But when you pull back from the wow factor, it really is about the kids sticking to it and learning at the end of the day. And they're coming up with some things that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And in addition to the normal science, technology, engineering that we tend to be heavier in today in terms of our course content, there's other newer areas in the arts and creation area that we see as other big potentials going forward.
That's great. And when you think about educators, how are they using your devices most effectively today? Or do you have any recommendations for them when
Sure.
they're adopting one
Sure.
of your devices?
So there's a number of different ways that people are using zSpace and taking advantage of zSpace today. Generally speaking, we're in a lab. I'll call it a lab setting, and it could be a lab setting in a separate room. It could be that's then used for different classes to come through, or it could be right in the classroom. And I think we have a bias for right in the classroom for a number of different reasons. So the workflow, which again we had to work our way through, and again as other folks that have started companies, the scaling of the business is typically one of the most difficult things. When we first started with zSpace in education, which is probably 2.5 years ago, we had 1 or 2 systems in a classroom, and that's not nearly enough systems for the classroom to be able to take advantage of it. And so we created this concept of a lab, and to us a lab is typically 12 systems, and it isn't just the hardware. I tell people we look like a hardware company, but it's really a solution, and it's the hardware, it's the software that comes along with it, and the applications. There's some teacher training that goes along with it, as well as support. And so we moved to the notion of selling a lab. Typically it's 2 students per 1 zSpace system, and the students work together in that, I'll call it lab setting. So if today teacher says we're going to learn about dissecting a frog, to pick that one in the science area, the teacher using zSpace with something we call zView, which is a multi-viewer capability, will walk the class through, here's what we're going to do today, learning about the frog and the anatomy of the frog, as opposed to formaldehyde and scalpels. They'll walk them through, here's what we want you to do and learn, and then the students go to the back of the class and each individually experience that same virtual dissection of a frog, if you will. It could be many other things that they're doing. We're also in some in higher education. We've got some vocational components to it. It could be about learning about motors. It could be chemistry. Many different components. But it really is that experiential experience for the students to go and really interact with zSpace, and that takes it to another level. Today we sell and actually we started by selling a few systems to schools. We built this notion of labs, and now we're really selling and implementing multi-labs.
Yeah.
So there's a number of school districts in the U.S. that have 5, 10, 15, 20 labs that are being used in different classrooms throughout the districts.
And that's it's fascinating to me. You use the word experiential. It's fascinating how kind of this is the next generation of education, that using one of your devices, that now students can experience the sciences and other subjects in ways that they never could before.
Yeah, and again, I think that's some of the folks like to focus on return on investment. You don't need to have Bunsen burners, which by the way are another dangerous potential item. You don't have to have the scalpels and whatnot, but the piece of it that makes it so unique is that they can experience it. They can do it at their own pace.
Yeah.
And the interaction that the kids have within the classroom, and oh, by the way, the teacher can get the attention of the kids, going back to that social interaction in the classroom, and can get their attention and say, okay, I want everybody to go over in this direction or that direction. We invested a fair bit in I'm going to say, developing the activities or the lesson plans that make it easy for the teachers to go and implement zSpace in the classroom. I think in K-12 in the United States in particular, based upon my experiences, it's an area that needs more innovation, is looking for more innovation. And there are a number of school districts that are headed down that path. STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, has a bunch of funding, both federal and state, behind it. But regardless of the funding, the impact of zSpace overall, it speaks for itself.
Sure. And so you said, so you've been in Silicon Valley about 17 years.
Correct.
Yeah. And so when you think about giving advice to, say, startup teams,
Sure.
Whether they're here in the States or worldwide, what advice do you have for them?
Sure. I have lots of different pieces of advice, having learned, I'll say, the hard way myself. I'd say first and foremost, if you're really passionate about what you're doing, and you really believe in the idea, be persistent. And there are not that many Snapchats or Facebooks that just go like that. There's a lot of ups and downs. In the development of this company, we spent a number of years in the early days not clear if we were going to make it. Quite frankly, not clear if we could build the product. And we're a company that actually built the product first and then took it to market. So I think persistence is an important one. Being passionate about what you want to go do. There's a lot of ups and downs. My experience has been, again, it typically takes longer. I don't know if it's twice as long or 4 times as long, but it takes longer, and it's harder. But if you're passionate about it, the hard work will pay off. And again, that's a big part of the spirit in Silicon Valley. But again, not every company goes from 0 to a unicorn in 12 months. In fact, those are the rarities.
Sure. And specific to, say, the culture here in Silicon Valley, let's say versus other parts of the world where you've worked, what do you enjoy most about Silicon Valley, and what may be some challenges?
Sure. If you want to be in tech, which is the reason I moved to Silicon Valley, this is the place to be. My wife and I moved in my earlier days. I think it was 7 times in 9 years, and that was more with bigger companies, and all in technology. So my career has been all in tech. And my wife said, I got one more move in me, and if you want to be in tech, this is the place to be. So I believe really strongly in that. It's got a lot of the inherent built-in things that startups and technologies companies need to get started and to grow. That said, there are lots of different trends in Silicon Valley that go on a regular basis. There's been plenty of articles written about herd mentality amongst VCs and them chasing specific areas versus other areas. Some people, I've known people who've started companies and they're always looking for that next trend to jump on, hoping, quite frankly, that they can find an exit within a relatively short period of time. I tend to come from the view of anything that I step into, we're looking at it for the long haul. That doesn't always exist here in the Valley. And the Valley goes up and the Valley goes down. Right now things are, I think, very hot in the Valley. And by the way, again, that goes back to the challenges. I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, the Facebooks and Googles and LinkedIn, which are all very close to Apple, which are very close to where we are here physically, to build our software development team was I'll say a challenge to get developers here. So all of the infrastructure is here for a startup. And obviously a lot of the money is here. And there are some great advisors, some great venture capitalists. But again, the successful tech companies, not all of them, but many of them are also here. So you really have to have something unique. And I go back to that passion and building something, and that's a key part of what you're obviously going to be selling to recruit and get people on your team.
Sure. And then the last question, Paul. So, and this answer that you give, it can be from any part of your life, professional or personal, but we always love to enter interviews with, what have you learned this week?
Sure. Boy, I learn something every week, and I have one failure on my resume, which was a startup that did not make it when the dot-com bubble burst, and I'll say there that in an 18-month period, I probably learned more than I did in the following, the following 6 or 7 years. I'll put it in the category of the basics, and I won't give a specific example, but working hard at building relationships, and whether it's with your customers, whether it's with your partners, OEM partners, sometimes we take that for granted. And by the way, that's, I'll call it sales. My background is a heavy sales, marketing, general management. I don't think you can ever underestimate that in building any business. And as it relates to your specific question,
Yeah.
and this week, we've been able to scale zSpace to a certain level, a pretty nice business,
Yeah.
and now we're very focused on scaling it to that next level. And so, back to the partners, the relationships, and quite frankly, the selling piece of it for us, that's the critical juncture that we're at. So that's, again, it may be blocking and tackling and saying something that's very obvious, but as you're building a company, and founding teams are in building a company, you go through different phases.
Oh.
And again, we happen to be at a stage where we're looking to scale to that next big level. And again, the partnerships, relationships, those are just happen to be top of mind with me right now.
Sure.
And we have many, but like any company, you want to grow and build on them.
Sure. Congratulations on
Thank you.
zSpace's success, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.